Reminder that this is going to be recorded and saved for posterity. If at any time you have any questions, go ahead, and if you have a phone, you can ask that on the phone. Otherwise, you can use the chat box to ask any questions. Jessica's online, and she will be helping to answer questions as we go if I don't stop. Hopefully we'll have a few more people join us. It's a busy time of year and a very exciting topic. So I hope the information today will be useful for everyone. Just a quick reminder that if you are on the call and just listening in, or if you're on the computer looking on, that the materials, I'm going to send updated materials after the call. There's some information on here that I wanted to send out afterwards for the game that we're going to be playing. Also, these webinars, they are optional for people, and if it's a topic that you see as being useful for you, we encourage you to join us. We encourage you to join us for all of them. If your program officer feels that it is a topic that you could use a little more resources on, we will certainly let you know that we think that you should really be on that one. Otherwise, there will be recordings if you need to listen to it at a later time. Okay, so today's webinar is about the governing documents and an overview of resources. Hopefully we'll be able to share some tips and tricks for navigating some very complicated information, and also just where is everything. I think often when we are managing our grants, there's just so many resources out there that it can be overwhelming. So where are the best places to start looking, and where can you find the most information? So today we are going to look over the governing documents and kind of discussing what is the hierarchy of governing documents. I'll be sharing my favorite trick, which is the Control F button. If you're not familiar with this, it's going to be a life-changing experience. Otherwise, if you do, I appreciate your patience while we walk through that tip for those who may not be aware of it. We'll look at the Managing AmeriCorps Grants website, the Criminal History Check website, the Knowledge Network, Serve Wisconsin's website, our program handbook, Wiggio, the AmeriCorps portal. We get lots of questions on the AmeriCorps portal on eGrants, and there's actually a place that you can go that has a lot of tips and tricks for using eGrants. So it's not a guarantee to make it work any better, but it certainly can help navigate some situations when you're using the portal. Then we're going to play a fun game, hopefully fun, on when to notify and when to ask permission from your program officer. I know that there's lots of different resources out there, and a number of different things can come up, and just hopefully trying to make it clear when to ask for permission and then when notification is required or asked for. Finally, we'll look over some required documents, particularly required documents that you have to have in your member files. This is really timely as we come upon monitoring. So just what are the required documents that you have to have in your member files? Also, we've been pulling together a list of policies and procedures. So this is not going to be exhaustive. This is not all the policies and procedures that your program needs to have, but it is certainly a good start, and we'll cover the ones that are required to have. Okay? So again, if at any time you have any questions, feel free to just ask them. Otherwise, you can put them in the chat box. Okay. This lovely diagram has been called the onion. It came from CNCS during our FGMI, and they use it at some of the national and regional trainings. And this diagram shows the different layers of governing documents when it comes to your AmeriCorps grant. So just like an onion, there are many different aspects. And when you look at this onion, the layers should not be viewed as trumping one another, but rather adding to each other. So it starts with the National and Community Service Act of 1990, followed by the Code of Federal Regulations. Then the Uniform Guidance, which is the OMB circulars that are part of the CFR. State and local regulations, the AmeriCorps Notice of Funding Opportunity, followed by your Notice of Grant Award, then any certifications and assurances that are put out by CNCS, provisions, and then, of course, any AmeriCorps Serve Wisconsin requirements. So an example of how these layers interact with one another Starting at the top layer and the CFR, you have your background check requirements. The requirements at that level are to do a sex offender search, the FBI nationwide search, and then the state of service and state of residency criminal history check. Those are at those levels. And as you go down, you'll notice that Serve Wisconsin adds on another level to look at the Wisconsin Circuit Court check. So again, these things don't trump each other. The lower levels can't supersede any of the higher levels, but can add on to. So we'll see that also with the uniform guidance. I ran into an instance where to use a component of the uniform guidance, the AmeriCorps NOFO and provisions added another step. So again, it doesn't trump, but rather it adds to. A lot of fun information there. Before I go any further, we're going to talk about Control F. If you're on a Mac computer, this is going to be Command F. And if you're not using Control F, I cannot recommend it enough. It saves the day and will save you tons and tons of time. So Control F is the search feature. It's a key command that you can use on any computer, and it allows you to search wherever you are. So if you have, if you look at the bottom left of your keyboard, you have the Control button. If you're on a Mac, it's about the fourth button in. It's the Command button. And you would hold that down, and then you hit the F key as you're holding down the Control key. I'm going to be doing that a lot throughout this webinar, so I just wanted to start by pointing that out. All right, so if you're looking at the governing documents and you have a question about the management of your AmeriCorps grant, a lot of times we'll get questions, and I'll tell you that the first place that I go when I get a question is the Managing AmeriCorps Grants website. This website offers a wealth of resources. I have it bookmarked at the top of my browser, and anytime we get a question, this is the one stop. It's through the corporation. It has links to the provisions, it has the regulations, it has the FAQ, it has a mega search. I will note that the mega search is using the 2014 provisions. So if you're looking for information on this 2015 program year, you're going to want to look at the individual provisions and FAQ. There is also other links beyond just the rules and regulations and provisions. If you scroll down, they have a number of state and national resources. They have information on progress reports. That's for commission staff. They also have a link to another site that we'll be talking about, the National Service Criminal History Check page. A lot of questions on financial management. This also has a link to the Omni Circular, the uniform guidance, the frequently asked questions on financial monitoring, any closeout documents instructions. Some of this is for our level at the commission, but there's also resources for you. There is the helpful e-grants documents here. You would be looking at the second one, the e-grants training and technical assistance for AmeriCorps state commissions and subgrantees. Links to the Knowledge Network, all on this page. Information on the civil rights and equal opportunity requirements, and then links to the provisions. Okay, so this page is, we're going to reference a number of these subpages, but this one page, if you put it on your browser, save it. I cannot recommend it enough. It will save you a lot of questions and time. So one question that I got recently was about electronic documents and storing electronic documents. So the first place I'll go is to this Managing AmeriCorps page. I will then look at the frequently asked questions. Okay. Another thing that I'll do is use the right click so you can open a tab and not close the current tab you're on. Once you're into the frequently asked questions page, instead of scrolling through the 50-some pages of the frequently asked questions, you can use that Control F feature to search for, you'll see a Find tab show up on the top right, somewhere on your screen, and you can search for whatever topic you're looking at. If I'm looking at electronic documents, I'm not going to put that whole word because that's going to narrow the search, so I'll just look up electron or electro, and then you hit next. And that's going to go automatically search through the whole document and find any instance of that word. Again, I only use part of the word because it will narrow your search too much if you're using electronic or in other instances. So if you keep it a little shorter but enough information, you'll be able to get all the spots where there's information. So then it leads me right to electronic storage of member files. I can reference this number. I see that it's C7 in the FAQ. So a lot of times if you ever get responses from your program officer, we'll be referencing the FAQ, and this is what we'll do. We just go straight to the document. You can search it. We encourage you to do the same thing. If you're not comfortable just taking this and reading it and then finding your own answer, you're more than welcome to reach out to your program officer for clarification purposes, but certainly we encourage you to search these documents for your own answers. Okay, so you can also hit next again and see if your word pops up in any other areas of the document. So I'll typically hit that until I cannot find any more. Okay, so you'll see there's other information on electronic timekeeping. Perhaps that's what you were looking for. Okay. And all the information is here. Another place, once I'm done looking at the FAQ, I'll go back to that Managing AmeriCorps main page, and then I'll take a look at the provisions. Since these two, the FAQ and the provision, house most of the requirements and most of the requirements for your AmeriCorps grant, they are great places to start by looking. Again, some of the links on CNCS's webpage will replace the page that you're on. So I do a right click and open in a new tab for any links that I look at. That'll just save me a little bit of time, but is a very useful way to do that. All right. So once the terms and conditions come up, which this page has been loading slowly, you'll notice that the provisions have been, they were going by two different names now, the provisions or the terms and conditions for CNCS. They call them provisions on the main page, and then once you get here, they are the same thing. The terms and conditions are listed out by the different types of grants that you can have. You all would be looking in the AmeriCorps button, so you just hit that little button, you'd open it up, and then you find the type of grant that you have. There's AmeriCorps fixed amount grants, have their own terms and conditions. You're looking for the AmeriCorps state terms and conditions. This year they have been broken into the general terms and conditions and the specific. Again, I'll open both of these by doing the right click, open in a new tab. And once those are open, I'm going to go to them. I'm going to do Control F. I'm going to look again for my electro. And there's nothing in this document. So I'll look into the specific terms and conditions. Use Control F to search that. And again, I come up with some information on using appropriate electronic systems. Okay, so and here's the record keeping information. So again, the Control F is just going to save you time from searching through a massive document and will make your finding your answers incredibly much easier. Okay, so these are the first places we'll go. We go to the AmeriCorps, the Managing AmeriCorps grants. We will then go look at the FAQs and then looking at the terms and conditions. Okay, so that's the first stop. And typically, for most of the questions we receive, we will find the answers in those documents. But again, if you remember the onion, you have to keep in mind that Serve Wisconsin may have additional requirements to what you're reading in these terms and conditions. So just like I said, it can add to, it won't trump these, but it could add another layer to something you're looking at, and that's where it's always good to check with your program officer or look at some of the other resources we'll look at today. Okay? So the next resource that you can get on from this page is the Criminal History Check resources. It's about midway down. I will send out all the links to this, and it's a National Service Criminal History Check resources page. So that is a mouthful for everyone. This page is also a huge resource for everything when it comes to your background checks. Now, this is probably one of the most important things that you're going to be doing is your background checks and making sure that they're done on time every single time. And I know that we are working hard to support you, and as you have staff turnover or there's a lot of nuances to these background checks, so hopefully this page is another one that will be a great resource. So again, I have it highlighted on the top of my browser so that I can access it easily anytime I get a question or have one on background checks. On this page, you'll see that there's a really helpful introductory course. I recommend that if you have new staff or you're learning about how to conduct these checks or what is required, that you start by taking this introductory course. A little caveat to that is that this was designed by CNCS, and so there's information on VISTA and Senior Corps grants as well, and some of those may be different for your AmeriCorps state grant. Okay, so Jessica makes a good point. The electronic files question that we got, you can search the provisions, but again, Serve Wisconsin adds on another layer. And right now we're not currently have any of our programs allowing them to have only electronic files, so CNCS does. So we've been getting lots of questions on that, but at this time we can't have that be the only way to keep track of your files. So that's a great example of how that onion, the deeper layers, have different requirements. Okay. So on the background check page, not only do you have a great introductory course, you also have a link to the federal regulations that outline the requirements for background checks. And then there is a specific background check FAQ. So this FAQ here, and they update it regularly. They'll tell you the date of when it was last updated, and that is one of the first places we'll look with questions to background checks. Okay, so this document, again, it's fairly large, but you can use Control F to search for any topic that you have, and you can find it easily there. Okay, I want to point out a few other pieces. It does give information on each of the specific checks that you can that you'll be doing. So there's guidance on the sex offender check, on the FBI check, on vendors that are acceptable to use. If your program is eligible for exemptions, it has information on those or alternate search procedures. Those are very rare, but if you're interested in learning about those, you can go here. And then, of course, there's wonderful information on compliance and enforcement. The one thing I want to point out about compliance here is the STEPS checklist. This STEPS checklist is really excellent if you're questioning whether or not you're doing your background checks 100% accurately. You can take a look at this checklist and go through for any one of your members or grant-funded staff, and you'll want to look through that and make sure that you're doing all of those. Again, I just want to let you know that there is, Serve Wisconsin does require that you do the criminal history or the Wisconsin Circuit Court check in addition to what's on this list. And because this is from CNCS, we would not have that on there. Okay, and enforcement, you may have heard that CNCS has issued a new disallowance guidance, and let's see, actually I'm going to take a minute. Jessica, I'm not sure. I'm getting a few people saying that they're trying to log into the webinar and it has not started yet. I don't know if you've gotten any of those.
Yeah, so I saw all these emails coming in, and I don't know why, but the link that was sent earlier wasn't working for people. So I quick posted it on Wiggio and sent an email to the PDs, so that's why a bunch of them are joining right now. So I really apologize for that, guys. You didn't miss a whole lot, and this is being recorded, so you can certainly catch the first 20 minutes at a later time. Sorry.
Thank you very much. Sorry about that link. We had a new link that was sent out. They were different links, but one is to link and it would just start the webinar right away, and the other one is the older one where you click and then you enter the phone information. So I apologize for those of you who are coming on now and had difficulty with that. You know, there's always a learning curve when using new systems. So thank you for those of you who are joining now. We're just going over some of the resources for information on governing documents. Okay. So we're on the background check component of it, and I just wanted to point out that under enforcement, this first one is the disallowance guidance. So if for some reason you notice that your background checks have not been done completely, but I know all of you won't ever have to use this, you can look at this new background check disallowance guide, and that's going to walk you through in 9 glorious pages everything that can happen if any of your checks are found to be non-compliant. I want to point out 2 things on this disallowance guidance. One, on this page, which I believe is the 4th or 5th page, the 4th page, is a table that will break down what the disallowance could be for your program. Some of the language is a little confusing, and they're working on that. But basically, if you look over at these 2 columns under reoccurring access to vulnerable populations and no access, you're going to be able to break down if you did this, then your disallowance would be the number on the top. I also want to point out that if, as you're preparing for any of your monitoring visits, that you notice that some of your checks were not done as they should have been, if you notify your program officer before we come and find it, there is a 50% forgiveness for that. Okay, so it's trying to help people. If you have something come up, just let us know, and you'll have a 50% waive of that penalty. Okay, so that is that one. Okay. Again, if you have any questions and you're joining, please feel free to put it into the chat box. And if you are just coming on, I apologize for the link snafu. We were just talking about the lovely governing documents here. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to close out some of these tabs. All right, before we move on to some of the other governing documents tab, one of the things we noticed in the survey we had sent out is that there's still some questions on Wiggio and how to use Wiggio effectively. If you have questions, I would love to address them today. So if you have questions specifically on Wiggio, if you would put them into the chat box, I will address them once we get to that page. If you have other questions, of course, you can ask those as well. All right. So in addition to the Managing AmeriCorps website and the Criminal History Check website from CNCS, CNCS also offers the Knowledge Network. And the Knowledge Network, this is again where there is just so much information, and it can really be easy to get overwhelmed. You can do a Control-F search for any web page that you're on, and you'll be able to have something come up in the top left box. Otherwise, the Knowledge Network also has a Find Resources search key in their website alone. One of the questions that we get a lot, and the Knowledge Network may be able to provide some resources for you, is on the uniform guidance. We are also learning some of the new changes, and certainly every program is unique. So if you put in uniform guidance and you just want to know more on that, you can type it into this search box on the Knowledge Network, and you can hit search. It will look through all of its resources that are on the Knowledge Network, all of its pages, and compile a list of keywords that come up with that. Okay. Also, if you look on this page on the left-hand side, there's a whole tab of resources by topic, so you can look there. Okay. So you'll notice that when I searched by the keywords uniform guidance, a number of topics came up, 2 full pages. That's still a lot to look through. So a tip when you're searching for 2 words like uniform guidance is to put them in parentheses and then search. What you do by putting these 2 words in parentheses is you narrow that search to only look for things that have those 2 words together. Okay, so that you'll see that that greatly reduced the information that came up on that. So if you want to go to the uniform guidance page, you now have an easier selection. There's a whole page on the Knowledge Network with many links and other resources solely for the uniform guidance. Okay? This is just one instance where there are resources on the Knowledge Network. If you have questions about eligibility, recruitment, enrollment, even member trainings, the Knowledge Network has a number of resources. So I encourage you to use their search feature and look at them. This is more for resources. Okay. Of course, we have the wonderful Serve Wisconsin website also. This website is now getting to that very bottom layer of the onion, and where we have a lot of important information just for Serve Wisconsin grantees. If you go down, if you're on the home page of Serve Wisconsin, you go down to the very bottom, you'll find the I want to find resources for my program. That's probably the most relevant page for all of you. On this page, we have links to Wiggio. We have links to our Program Director Handbook. We have links to all of the documents from the 2015 Financial Grants and Program Management Institute. We have important information on criminal history check documents. Okay. And probably one of my favorite things on this page for all of you is our monitoring tools. Every year we update these to be the current year's monitoring tools. This is the information we use when we come monitoring. I encourage you all to look through it, particularly if you look at the member file checklist that says member file checklist Serve Wisconsin staff. That's what we use to look at your member file. So if you go through that checklist, you'll notice, and that's what we'll find or we won't find. So it's a good little tip. Okay. There's also some information on health insurance for your members. There's some information on sample forms where you can find them. They link mostly to Wiggio and the Knowledge Network. And then there's additional resources and links to the rules, regulations, and provisions, which is that Managing AmeriCorps website. On this page, if you're looking at that onion, which I'll show it again actually for those of you who were not here before. Okay. This onion is the hierarchy of governing documents. So each layer adds to the one above it. They don't trump each other, but they add to. Okay, so if you have something like the electronic member file storage or the background checks that at the Code of Federal Regulations level allows something, but you're curious if Serve Wisconsin does or doesn't, I would encourage you then to go to the PD Handbook. And the easiest way to find the PD Handbook is on the Serve Wisconsin page. This is another one that you should save to your computer. It's all listed out by topic. There's a table of contents. This table of contents is clickable so that you can search right down to the area. This one also, Control F. If you missed it and don't know about Control F, it is a command key that allows you to search any document on your computer. You use it by pressing the bottom left-hand corner of your keyboard, the Control key, hold that down and hit F, and that will find. If you're on a Mac, it's the Command F key, which is the fourth button from the bottom left of your keyboard. So if I'm in the PD Handbook and I have questions about exiting a member and I don't want to read through the hundreds of pages that this PD Handbook is, I can just enter exit and search. Now that's going to then highlight all the instances of where exit is found. Okay, so that's a lot of exits. In the table of contents, I want to look at suspensions or early exits. I can click on that and it'll jump me straight to that part of the PD Handbook. The PD Handbook compiles the Serve Wisconsin requirements as well as the federal and state requirements. So it's really a great one-stop. What does Serve Wisconsin require? What are suggestions? Okay. So this is an amazing resource. We do update it every year, and we take a lot of time to do so. So I hope that you know about this and are using it to answer some of your own questions as they come up. Okay. All right. So I'm not seeing many questions here. I hope that's a good thing. All right. So let's get back to our page. After the PD Handbook, I have Wiggio here. I haven't seen any questions specifically on Wiggio come in. So the one thing that I will want to point out about Wiggio is I know that it's a ton of resources, particularly when you are in that Folders tab. Okay. So I want to tell you something about this Folders tab. If you are in the Folders tab and you look down towards the bottom, there is a Program Resources folder. That Program Resources folder has a ton of resources. And if you look at it, it can be a little daunting to try to find something. So a tip for looking through this is if you go to the Program Director Handbook that we offer, and you'll notice in the table of contents, the very, very last chapter of the Program Director Handbook, Chapter 10, is a table of contents of that resources folder, of the Program Resources folder in Wiggio. So if you're curious what is in any one of the folders in that Program Resources folder in Wiggio, you can look at the table of contents here in the Program Director Handbook. Again, we do our best to keep this updated. There's a ton of resources. So again, if you're looking for information on closeouts or what the closeout form is, you can find it in that folder in the Wiggio page. Okay. Okay. Unfortunately, yeah, there's no way, the way that Wiggio is set up, to search the folders tab. There's just not a way. You can use the Control-F key on this main page and you can look at exits, but it's only going to search the titles of these folders. Unfortunately, that's just the way Wiggio is, and we can't fix that, so hopefully the table of contents in the PD handbook will help you. You can search the feed document, but it's only going to search the conversations, so that's not going to show you everything on that topic. So until we can, we were trying to figure out another way, but until we do, we just have the table of contents to look through. So thanks for your patience with that. Okay. Is there any other questions? Please put them in the chat box. Okay. And the very last thing is the eGrants help page. So eGrants, we all, if you've been using eGrants, know that it can be a struggle at times. And certainly we don't have all the answers when it comes to eGrants. However, there are some resources available both in the Wiggio folder for eGrants and on this Managing AmeriCorps page. If you scroll down to about midway towards the bottom, there's a whole eGrants section. And again, there's training and technical assistance information for eGrants on this page. There's a really great PowerPoint to help you understand how to use it. There's frequently asked questions for using eGrants. Okay. This My AmeriCorps overview is really helpful for setting up if you're new to the system. And there's all these resources. Okay, so there are help things for eGrants. Again, there's going to be issues, so your patience with that, and you can let us know if there's any questions that aren't covered here or any new struggles that come up. Okay. Okay. All right, so one of the big things I think that we continue to go back and forth with is when do you notify your program officer of something and when do you ask permission for something. So this is hopefully a fun little interactive game where we will go through a number of instances on notification and permission. So when you're required to ask permission, that is, you are required to ask permission. For notification items, there could be a time that your program officer does not require you to notify them. That is something that your individual program officer will let you know. However, if when in doubt, notify your program officer and they will let you know if you do not have to do that. So to play this game, there will be a term that comes up on the screen. I'll read the term, and then if you have the handouts from before, I sent you a blank table. You can write down a check or a mark on that table, whether you think it's notification or permission. And to make it fun for us, you could enter a N in the chat box or a P in the chat box for notification or permission. Okay? And none of this is held against you. It just is supposed to be fun. because this is a very riveting topic, so we got to try to have fun with it. Okay, so the use of paper enrollment and exit forms, would this be an instance where you notify or ask permission? Okay. Let's see. So this one did just change recently. This one is now you have to ask permission to use paper enrollment or exit form. Gary is the winner. Good job, Gary. All right. The next one, late enrollment. So if you're going to be enrolling any of your members outside of the deadline you set on your final enrollment form. Okay. So would this be an instance where you notify your program officer or, ooh, they're coming in now. Excellent. That's fun. Okay, so this one is notification. This is a notification. You do want to let us know. You don't have to ask permission. A lot of times we appreciate that, specifically if you have a really late deadline. The idea of the final enrollment form is to have you thinking about your members and how long they need to complete their term of service. We do ask that you notify us if this is going to happen. In some cases, permission is needed when you're a youth corps and you're enrolling different slots at different times of the year. So I will give that caveat. Inability to fill all awarded slots. If you are not able to fill all of your awarded slots, is this an instance where you would notify your program officer, ooh, unanimous answers coming in, or ask permission? Yeah. This is where you would notify us. I don't think you would want to ask us to not fill all of your slots necessarily. We know that you all are working very hard to do this. So just let us know. This helps us keep track of retention and enrollment. Okay, so slot conversions. If you have an instance where you need to convert a slot, is this where you would notify or ask permission? Oh, good. Okay. We have a lot of really smart PDs here. That one is permission. If you do need a slot converted, you do have to ask permission for that to happen. That's just so that we can help make sure that it's all compliant. And good. All right. Term of service changes. If you have a member who is already enrolled and they're looking to change that term of service, is this where you would ask permission or you would notify your program officer? Interesting. All right, this one is permission. So we do ask that you ask permission before changing the term of slot. We just want to make sure that it is compliant, that we're not going to run into any unforeseen consequences for these kind of changes. So this one is permission. And just for a little background on this game, I did go through the contract documents, our PD handbook, to find any instances where it said permission or notification. Okay. If you have questions on any of these specifically, you can ask your program officer. Okay. Member suspensions. Is this a notify or a permission instance? Okay. You guys are very smart. This is a notification situation. This is also one of the interesting ones where your program officer may not require notification. They may handle that differently. Some program officers do require notification, however. Early exits, CPC, otherwise known as compelling personal circumstances, for employment. This is if you're going to exit someone early for employment and give them compelling personal circumstance. This isn't relevant for some programs, but for those that it is, this is an instance of permission. Okay? All right, early exits for compelling personal circumstance, whatever the compelling circumstance is this a notification or a permission instance? Okay, coming in. I really appreciate those of you who are playing along on the chat box. It's very fun to watch these come in. And this is, you are all right, a circumstance of notification. We just want a heads up, and we don't need a lot of detail, especially if you have a member who's maybe dealing with a medical issue. We don't need to know specifics. In fact, you should not share specifics necessarily. If you say that they're having a medical issue that they need time, that's sufficient. Just make sure that you have proper documentation in their member file. Okay? And again, in their member files, you don't have to have details on whatever that medical condition is, but something that shows that they do, in fact, need that time. Okay. All right, we'll play a few more of these. We won't maybe play as many as I was thinking. But all right, contract period and program year modifications or extensions. So if you need to modify anything in your program year or your contract, so if you need an extension, see, everybody's good. Cannot trick you. That is an instance of permission. So there's a number of things that need to be factored into if you're looking at an extension. So we do ask that you ask your program officer for permission so we can keep track of all those things. Ooh, I hope none of you have to deal with this, but if you have a serious injury or death occurring to an AmeriCorps member during their service, is this an instance of notification or permission? Yeah, you're good. This is notification. This one, please do notify us. Just so that if anything down the line, we can help support you and your program. Yeah, I don't, Steve, you're right. I don't know if permission is probably a good idea. Be accomplices to murder. That is, I'm sure, in the federal regulation somewhere. Good, good, good. Staff or host site changes. If there's a staff or a host site change. All right, this one's a notification. Just let us know if you're changing anything related to the staff or host site. This is an interesting one that was new to me. If there's a substantial change in the level of participant supervision, so the supervision your AmeriCorps members are getting, that one is actually permission. And again, it says substantial, so it's specific. All right, we'll do two more. All right, changes in scope or objectives or goals of your program, whether or not they involve budgetary changes. I like it. It's going fast here. You are right. That is an instance of permission. So if you're going to change your scope, objectives, goals, even if it's not budgetary, you would ask permission. If it is budgetary, you would also ask permission. Modifications to your performance measures. Yep. So you guys are good. That is also permission. Okay, so we can actually, do you want to keep playing this or we'll end early? We'll keep going. So what I'm going to do is I will send you out a table that has all of these on them. It will be kind of like a cheat sheet as to the notification and permission. It's a filled out table of what I sent on Monday. Okay, so just a little bit more here. Thank you all for participating. That was very fun. I hope it was fun for you. All right, so required documents, there's always just, what is required, what's not. So what we can tell you is required in member files are the following items. Now, you could have other files in here depending on what your grant requires or other things that you need in your files. But what we look for and what you have to have, your member application, if you are using an online application, that's different. You wouldn't have to have that in there. But if you use a paper application, we look for that in your member files. The member eligibility form, and of course these need to be completed completely and signed and dated on or before the member's start date. The criminal history checks procedure verification form, that's a Serve Wisconsin requirement that also needs to be filled out. Then the criminal history checks that need to be in a separate and secure member file, proof of the sex offender check on or before the member's start date, the Wisconsin state criminal history check, and if there was a state of residence check, the FBI check, and for those, if you have initiation showing that it was initiated on or before the member's start date, and then the completed check. And finally, a Serve Wisconsin requirement of the Wisconsin Circuit Court access check. Remember, you have to have, if there are hits or findings for your member, you need to have all of those and have a system for adjudicating any member that maybe is falsely showing up on those records. That goes for the sex offender check as well, for all of them. All right, and then if you had an instance where you initiated the FBI or state checks, then you would need accompaniment until one of those comes back, and you would need that documentation in your member file. Okay. Paper enrollment and exit forms, if you were granted permission to use them, they would need to be in your member files. a signed and dated member contract by the participant and the program. Again, these need to be signed on or before the member's start date. A publicity release that's signed and dated and includes your program, Serve Wisconsin, and the corporation. Healthcare request or waiver. This is for full-time members only and is not applicable to Education Award programs or professional core programs. Child care request waiver or request form or RIT waiver. Again, this is only for full-time members and or members serving in a full-time capacity. Correct me if I'm wrong. And not applicable for Education Award programs. Okay. Your member evaluations, these are so important. If you are a full-time or half-time member, you have to have a midterm evaluation, and all members, no matter what, no matter when they leave, how they leave, if they were a member, they need to have an end-of-term eval in their member file. Okay, if you have a member who's not able to sign their evaluation, you note that they're no longer there and they can't sign it, but you still do the evaluation. Okay, exit or end-of-term forms, you need to document you can use the end-of-term and exit forms only if your member kind of goes AWOL, and you have to, otherwise that's done on eGrants. But for all members that are leaving early for compelling or otherwise, or any suspensions, those have to have documentation of what happened in their member file. My youth scores, you get extra paperwork that you have to have. The first aid or CPR training certification in the member file. If your member left for employment as compelling personal circumstance, there's a guidance memo that indicates what you have to have there. If their member serves 2 consecutive terms in the same program year, if you're enrolling 16-year-olds, and then if you use quarter and minimum time slots before the last 3 months. Okay. We recommend some suggested documents, not required, that member file checklist that our staff uses to look through your files. If you use that even on some of your member files, just to audit your own, you're going to have a really good sense of what we find at monitoring. Okay, so I strongly suggest that to use. Okay. All right. So policies and procedures to have. This is another one where I searched those governing documents, the Serve Wisconsin Program Director Handbook, any contracts to find suggested and required policies and procedures. This is a huge list, and I sent it out to you. And certainly it is not exhaustive. I'm sure there are actually more policies and procedures you should have, but if you have these to start with, you will be in a very good place. So these are the programmatic policies and procedures. Again, I will send this out in paper. I'm not going to read through all of these. Okay. And then also the written policies and procedures for budget practices. This is a big one. Depending on your agency, this may look very different. So we're not saying that. I do want to point out here one thing that had come up was the conflict of interest policy. This is just your agency may have a conflict of interest policy. We just ask that you have one, and if needed, if there is a conflict that you've identified in your program, that you would notify us of that. Okay. Thanks, Dominique. All right. Okay. It's a lot. You all do amazing work. There's no small task to ask you to keep track of all of these things. That's why your program officer is here to help you. We hope that these tools give you some confidence to navigate those things, resources to answer some of your questions, and if you ever have questions, that's what we're here for your program officers. But these resources are kind of where we go. So if you have any other questions, feel free to contact your program officer. This will be posted to Wiggio within 2 business days. And if you have any other questions, your program officer is there for you. The next webinar is April 13th, and it will be on recruitment with our Casey. And if you have suggestions or things that you want to see from these webinars, please let us know. Your feedback is appreciated. Reminder I said at the beginning that these webinars are strongly, strongly encouraged, but they are not required. If they are required, your program officer will let you know. So there's certain ones maybe we've identified that you could use a little additional help with. We'll let you know that we really want you to be on that one. We want you to be on all of them, but it's not required. Okay? So thank you for listening to me talk for a while. Hope you have a good day. Appreciate it. Oh, one question. Does CNCS have ownership in a paper company? You know that probably is a smart investment. Not to my knowledge. Yes, Jessica, we are sending out brief surveys. Your feedback, again, is really important. We want these to be useful for you. So when you get that feedback, if you could fill it out, be honest, and let us know how we can serve you better. Thank you so much.